Hey, it's Lauren. Welcome to the Raw Raw podcast. On the show today, I spoke with Jen Nash, CEO at Keystone Group and founder of Arc and Brook, a thought leadership club. So I really liked our conversation. Jen is clearly a really, just honest and well thought out woman. I really loved how she shared her journey of, basically creating a business for herself and finding her own place. We talked a lot about public relations. We talked about media relations and different types of media like earned, shared, paid, and owned media. We talk about some of the challenges with clients and, entrepreneurs learning to pitch themselves. So buckle in. There's a lot of value in this episode. I can guarantee you that. Let's do it. This episode's been brought to you by the Raw Raw Spirit team. Growing your business is just the beginning. Too many business owners try to grow their business on their own. They spend countless hours testing out and investing in hundreds of strategies, all with the aim of building their business. Without support, someone helping to guide you and cheering you on, motivation starts to go down. Your passion starts to decrease. You start running out of money and losing faith in your business and yourself. The Raw Raw Spirit team is a supportive community filled with expert programming, up-to-date training, guest experts, mentorship, and like-minded business owners. This isn't another community and another strategy. This is a serious and supportive community of business owners focused on supporting each other and building their business. You are welcome here. All right, welcome to the show. My guest today is Jen Nash, CEO at Keystone Group and founder of Arc and Brook, a thought leadership club. She is a global visibility coach, transforming emerging thought leaders into visible experts. Known for amplifying women's voices through an authentic storytelling, such as the #WiredWomen YouTube series. She is also a talk show host at Spotlight NetTv and magazine editor-in-chief. A philanthropreneur, I can't say that word, philanthropreneur. A philanthropreneur and publicist at heart, she is a hands-on media relations training coach, presenting clients as thought leaders by helping them earn industry recognition and media coverage. Jen is joining me to talk about all things PR and, well, we'll see where else we go actually, but thought leadership. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. Sorry for that mouthful bio introduction. I can't pronounce philanthropreneur, but I know what it means as well. So thank you. You've done a great job.
Thank you very much. I always like a challenge at 6 a.m. It's great. So that's perfect. Got to start my day off right. And I know now that I've learned something new or I've learned how to pronounce a big word. So yay me.
There you go. There you go.
So I know that you teach, small, medium businesses, artisans, freelancers, and sole traders, NGO leaders on thought leadership. So why don't we go into the whole realm of thought leadership exactly and how you sort of got interested in that subject?
Yeah, so my background is public relations, and I started as an editor-in-chief of a magazine. And being an editor-in-chief of a magazine, it was a magazine called Jetem. It was actually a lifestyle magazine / bridal out in Zambia, which is my country of origin. And I just found myself writing about people and what they do and just amplifying their voices and just getting them seen and heard. And that in turn created credibility around them. And so fast forward to 2017, I decided to make it authentic. I decided to make it authentic and become a PR professional. And so I went back to uni and decided to pursue a public relations and advertising degree, which then gave me more clarity to realize that what I'd been doing all along was actually thought leadership. And I didn't want to claim that until I had the credentials to show for it, right? So I'm actually, even though I've been practicing this for over 12 years, I'm actually only just graduating from my PR and advertising degree 2020 this summer.
Yeah,
So
girl.
yeah. Fast forward to April, actually 2020, I realized that in the market, everybody else was doing PR at the agency side of things, like a DFY, do for you type of agency.
Right.
And with the Black Lives Matter, with the COVID, everything happening almost at the same time,
Yeah.
even though they were 2 months apart. And also prior to that, there was an undercurrent going on in the industry, which meant there was an ageism issue going on in the PR industry, but there's also issues with not having women in the top. So there was no way that I could graduate from a PR and advertising course, but with a backdrop of 12 years experience and go and start working in an agency at a graduate level. I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't prepared to do that. I was either going to, my minimum entry point was account director. But every time I went into an agency for interviews, they were either saying you're overqualified or you're underqualified. You don't have enough experience in the UK to back you up as a PR account director. So I was sort of torn in between. I was like, okay, I like the quote that Bose St. James says. She's one of the very outspoken C-suite CMOs in the United States. She says, if they can't invite you to the table, you go out in the wood and chop the wood and create a table and sit on it. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
I love that.
If I couldn't be invited to the table,
yeah, I love that.
So that's where I'm at. So to answer your question specifically, I'm passionate about now amplifying people's voices who would find themselves in the position that I found myself in. So I'm advocating for people to be heard.
Yeah, because it's actually, I'm going to talk to you a little bit that, like, I have some questions about that a little bit later too in our conversation, just about the fact that I think that as business people, we sometimes think that media will come to us when really that's actually not really going to happen. So, you know, I guess when you think about thought leadership, I mean, does everybody have a story? Is that what you kind of help people do, is to find that, you know, they have their own story and they have their own voice, and, you know, if they're not invited to the table, they make their own because they're still valuable and important?
That's true to a certain extent. It's not just about the voice. It's about, does everyone have expertise? So because thought leadership is more about the expertise, and the storytelling aspect of it is about telling a story about the expertise that they have.
Right.
So a thought leader is not everyone who has a story to tell, but it's every expert who has expertise and opinion to give in the area of expertise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they should have had at least 10,000 hours of expertise in that specific industry, in that specific skill, in order for them to qualify as a thought leader. You've got to be an expert in your field.
Yeah, I think that, you know, sometimes it's difficult because everyone is like, there are a lot of generalists as well. So there are a lot of people who are really good at a bunch of things, but not necessarily honed in on the one skill. It's funny how you kind of talked about how you have, you know, over 12 years experience in PR, but did you feel that you weren't going to be taken seriously without your certificate, that you needed that to kind of validate the work that you had been doing?
I don't want to sound like I'm disagreeing with you in everything that you're saying, but actually, to borrow what you just said, I was more of a generalist then. So my going back to university and getting a PR qualification was for me to specialize in PR, because previously I had an English major, and I was more of a copywriter or more of an editor of a magazine. So writing for a magazine, business development, and so on and so forth. And my side hustle was running a shop, a bridal shop. So I was kind of a generalist doing everything. So I needed to wear one hat. And if I had to decide which hat to wear, then I decided to wear that hat of saying that I am a publicist. And that's why authenticating my credentials became necessary for me to go back to university.
Yeah.
Not because I needed validation from anyone, but because I just needed to hone my skills.
Yeah, you were niching down essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So I know one of the areas that you specialize in is media relations, and also how to use, your public relations skills to pitch to journalists to gain shared
Mm-hmm.
and earned media. Can you talk to me about the difference between shared and earned media?
Of course. Then thank you for asking that question. So obviously, the difference is usually earned media is pitched on a human interest. So you'd want to go to a journalist with a news angle that you have. I would suggest that it would be on something that's trending in the news at that particular time. It's quite competitive, but it delivers very invaluable results. So when pitched successfully, obviously earned media will end you up in Peer 1 media. You gain publicity, which is equivalent to thousands and thousands of ad spend value, but you get it for free of charge. And also, yeah, because then, journalists love to much as I would love to share the tips in detail of how you would actually go about earning media publicity. I would say, the basic idea behind crafting that pitch that would earn you publicity from a journalist would just simply going after a highly targeted press release, an email or a social media DM to a journal that you're following in that particular industry, and then piggyback riding on the trending subject, like I said earlier on. That's the most creative strategy. And then I would recommend you having the WWWH, so the what, where, when, and how, as the main points that you want to use in that pitch that you send out to a journalist. So that's the earned media in short. And simply put, it would be the topic, the title, and the timing of what's happening in the industry. So it has to be newsworthy. It has to be of public interest, so to speak. Whereas shared media is mostly, because there's a framework in public relations which is called PESO. It's paid and shared and owned. So right now we're just discussing the earned and shared, whereas paid, I think, is self-explanatory, and owned is the same. So the shared media typically is pushing content from, let's say, your website, your owned platform, and you're pushing that content through your channels, your platform, your social media channels, and or you're getting your brand ambassadors to root for you and reshare, repost on their own sites. Influencers, for example, usually those are earned media pushers. And then the brand themselves could also share that particular media, that particular information on their own channels. So that is earned, that is, shared. But equally, that same content can be shared by journalists. They can be the ones that are actually sharing to their target audience.
Yeah.
So there's sort of like an overlap.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges, with people knowing how to pitch themselves? Do you think that maybe they're concerned about being too salesy, or that they're not interesting, or the imposter syndrome, or that's the self-limiting beliefs that we all talk about and learn about? Yeah.
You've literally just taken the words out of my mouth with regards to the imposter syndrome. I think that's a main barrier, because a lot of people just shy away from reaching out to journalists. But one thing that people need to know is that journalists are also content seekers. They're looking for content that they can then serve to their audience. So they do appreciate content that is given to them. But their pet peeves, and in fact, this was just recently published on LinkedIn, there was a survey that was just done about what journalists hate about PR pitches. So actually, it would be a good idea to point your listeners to that. However, I'll attempt to highlight what the main things that came across in that report. And this report is done actually every 5 years or so. So the main thing that they say that they hate is a salesy pitch. Okay, they hate a salesy pitch because PR is what my professor used to say, it's what you pray for. Advertising is what you pay for. So
Yes.
if you're praying for publicity, you cannot be a chooser. You ask your God to provide to you from their grace. So your journalist in this instance is your God, your little
Yeah.
God with a small G.
Yeah.
They decide when to answer your prayers.
Yeah, and how they're going to answer it as well.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
one of the other things that came up is that they hate being chased for answers.
Right.
So they don't want people who are pushy, like, oh yeah, I sent you an email. Did you check my email? Have you seen my email? Da, 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 da. They hate that. And then the other thing is that they hate people who actually write to them and tell them, can I go out for a coffee with you? And, so that I can tell you what my story is. Okay. And then the worst one that they hate is somebody who contacts them and is contacting them or phoning them between 9 and 12 p.m. because that's the busiest time that a journalist has. Mm-hmm. So if you want to even make a phone call to a journalist, try and call them afternoon.
Right.
Because don't call them when they're trying to get the news out. They get so irritated. So those are some of the things that you need to research the background of your journalist. Make sure that you're sending them topical news that's related to their area of expertise, because even journalists have got expertise.
Yeah.
So for example, you're a doctor. You're not going to send any breakthrough in medicine. You're not going to send it to someone who's involved in, let's say, dogs. She reports about dogs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just common sense.
Yeah, exactly. See the articles this journalist has written before, because what if you contact a journalist who tends to put a negative slant or look for the underground story that nobody wants to talk about, right?
Exactly.
I think that some of the challenges are that, I guess if you're over imposter syndrome, or if you have a day where you're trudging forward and you're not letting that voice get you down, that we sometimes forget that all these other people have their other life, like their own life that they're living, and they're being pitched by hundreds of other people as well. You're not that special. I mean, you are, but you're not, you're a number until somebody gets to know you. And
exactly. But to be fair, I mean, the relationship is so amicable between journalists and PR professionals and the audience at large. This is why especially social media comes into its own. So if you've been genuinely following these journalists for a long time, you're a fan, you're bound to know what makes them tick. And when you do approach them or DM them, you can DM them. They appreciate that, because they appreciate that you're acknowledging them, that they're, you know what they do. So you're appreciating them with content that's relevant to them. It's insulting to be approached with content that's not relevant. That means you don't even know who I am. You just want a way into the publicity platform.
Plus you're wasting your time as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, because you work with a bunch of different industries, and I love the fact that you're working with people who, would struggle for visibility. It's a clear, niche that's required, because, as entrepreneurs, we're so focused on getting our own business off the ground that sometimes adding the PR part to the business isn't natural for everybody. So, when you're with all the different industries that you work with, does your advice change based on the industry or the professional that you're working with? Or do you kind of, suggest that they all, I guess, pitch in a similar way, or, kind of handle themselves as thought leaders in a similar way? Or does it change?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that it's adjustable and it's bespoke. So each industry has its own merits and it has its own rules of engagement, I call them. So how you would approach, for instance, a doctor's PR is not the same as, let's say, an accountant's PR. Because a doctor's PR, there's a lot of things that are involved that you need to be aware of. If a doctor is sort of talking about medicine, there's certain rules that we have that guide PR in terms of deceit and stuff like that, that a doctor cannot claim to provide a particular treatment that will bring complete healing to that person. So they cannot present themselves as an expert in saving lives, because that's subjective. You know, you need to be very objective as a doctor. Whereas an accountant, it's based on empirical data, that when I do your accounting, and provided that you haven't been lying to HMRC, the audit result is such that you will get tax credit at the end of it. So I am an expert at telling you that and showing you where you can earn profits and how you can be able to save on taxes from HMRC. But as a doctor, I cannot guarantee that you can live, even though this performer maybe is a heart surgeon, he's performed a numerous number of surgeries successfully, he still cannot go out there and say, I'm an expert, I'll guarantee that you live for another 25 years. You can't do that. So there's certain guidelines that we need to follow depending on the industry. And just to add on to that, so the reason why I use the doctor as an example, because I had the privilege of, during my degree, I had the privilege of being in Boston, where the medical profession and the public relations industry are very, work hand in hand. They're synergetic, if there's such a word. They're in synergy. And it's very important. And I think Australia and United States were one of the only two countries in the world that are allowed to advertise medicine. The rest of the world doesn't.
Oh.
In terms of pharmaceuticals, So I think it was either New Zealand or Australia, but I'm quite certain that it was Australia. So things like that. So you have to be aware of your surrounding and the guiding principles within that region where you are at, and how you can present yourself as a thought leader.
Right. So when you're working with the, different professionals, different thought leaders, do you feel you need to know a lot about their background, or do you sort of follow a formula, like getting to know them, but understanding? I mean, I did hear what you said there about sort of paying attention to, the way that you can frame certain things depending on the industry. But I mean, surely you wouldn't be an expert in, medicine and accounting and painting and dancing, and although maybe you are, I don't know.
No, that's right. That's a very good question, and it's a fair question as well. So yes, you're right. The industry is something else, but the person and the art of perception is a framework. So you work around that framework to then, and then I think it's more about, in terms of PR, it's about the person, isn't it? In PR, we believe that people buy from people. So it's about the image of that human being that I am talking to as my client, not necessarily about the industry. It's a plus to know something about the industry, but and ordinarily they would even know what the guidelines are about their own industry. So for me, my role is to focus on them as a person. So we do focus around what is called as neuroscience. And the neuroscientific approach is what helps us. We have a persona of the client that we're dealing with, and we create whatever packages and propositions around that client's persona. And and that's what helps me to build an ideal kind of publicity strategy for them.
Right. So, I mean, I feel that when you look at media, when you look at information and content, we're really inundated and overwhelmed. It's really hard, I think, to stand out in a crowded landscape, so to speak. So, do you have strategies that help you to get your thought leaders out there and seen? Are there, you know, some little secret tips that, you know, that you use that you'd be willing to talk
Yeah.
about, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. The secret tool is out in the open and people just need to embrace it. The secret tool is as good as your DNA. So each person has their own story to tell. The secret about PR is authenticity. So if you're authentic
Right.
and you're telling your story from your heart, it's real, it's not scripted, it's not flaky, it's the truth, and you're owning your truth. The secret to PR is also being as open as possible, using your emotions, using your expertise that comes in handy, but also using statistics. So it's really important when you want to present yourself as a thought leader, you're going to use an example and you have to present statistics because that's what makes you even more authentic and believable and credible.
Right.
Because you can't just use anecdotes and just say, oh yeah, but you know, when I was living in Australia, I came across a dog and the dog leapt into the ocean and then the ocean took it away in the storm. You just can't do that. You've got to be credible enough by having statistics and say, when I was in Australia, I lived in a certain area, you named the place where you lived and how many dogs you saw and what was the strength of the storm. Maybe you can say 7.5. I don't know how they weigh storms, but you need to give those statistics, empirical data.
Right.
That helps the person listening to you be able to, if you're backing it up so that they can find that evidence and they can prove what you're saying is correct.
Right. Are you kind of saying that that's irrefutable data?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I one of my favorite things, it's so funny, when I was traveling around the UK, I think last year or the year before, we were walking by this pub and it said on a sign, it was like, the best coffee in town, says me and my mates or something like that. And I thought that was so hilarious and so funny.
Yeah.
But, you know, so I think that what you're saying is that when you have, you know, your numbers and your stats, that it's almost saying that this is undeniable proof that X,
exactly
is true.
Yep, that's it.
Right. So I guess what you do is you essentially help people to figure out, you know, these sort of success stories, these numbers, these sort of, you know, these leverage points, you know, that they can
exactly
using. Right.
Yeah, and to use that genius point, that genius zone that they have. Because again, I said thought leadership is about having your own personal DNA. So what is it that is a personal experience that you apply to your opinions and that you can share with your audience? But it's also, again, being human as well. So nobody is interested in a thought leader that just chucks out numbers and talks about corporate gobbledygook. Nobody is interested in that. So those types of thought leaders are the ones you find in Forbes magazine or on New York Stock Exchange. But if you want to be at this level, middle level, and you just want to be authentic, then you also have to appear to be human as well. There has to be a human story.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, one of the things that, you know, I always like to teach and talk about too, is that, you know, consumers get behind brands who have values that they respect. And that's why, you know, when they understand the people behind the brands, you know, if you have a brand, I mean, I know you deal with a lot of individuals as well, solopreneurs and whatnot, but, you know, when you get behind the heart, I guess, of what it is you're trying to sell, or, you know, whatever it's service you're providing or product you're providing, when you see the heartbeat or you see the people that have gone into making that happen, that's when you have that real connection.
Absolutely. And I just want to add on to what you just said, because that's an oftenly mistaken notion that brands are just the business. Human beings are also brands. So even if you're a solopreneur, you are a sole trader, you're also a brand. So the fact that you've got a name and a last name, you are the brand for your business. So you need to act and behave in that same way that brands, like you said, rightfully so, brands are loved for their for their culture and brand messaging. And you as a person, people buy from people. So they'll buy from you. You are your brand.
Yeah.
So you need to apply the same kind of brand messaging and key messaging around yourself and your brand. And that's how you carry yourself.
Right. As a personal brand, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So, I guess, I sort of alluded to it at the beginning of our conversation, but I am interested in the fact that, I think that business people, artists, people who have their own personal brands, I guess, depending on who you are, I'm being really general here, but they do sometimes think that, oh, the media will just come to me and that the PR part of my business isn't something that I need to actually pursue. And that's actually not true, right? We need to put the effort in to get that exposure.
Yeah. Exactly. And this is why I would be out of a job right now if that was true. Because people need to know, because I realize there's that gap in the market that nobody's actually educating these small and medium to enterprises. Either they're not educating them or they're not paying attention to them and they're not helping them out, because most of them get put off just by the price tag of how much an agency charges for them to have PR exposure. But also historically, PR has been notorious for not having measurable outcomes. So those are some of the things that now, that's the reason why I'm packaging my coaching to say, this is a DIY service. You can be your own publicist with social media around the same exact way that you're promoting you're probably doing a paid ad on Facebook, or you're promoting buy this, buy this. What I am saying is to change that narrative. You can't always be selling to your community. There are times when you need to do some PR. And how can you do that PR? And what's the difference in language between selling and pitching yourself, doing public relations? Doing public relations is pretty much engaging with your community without expecting anything in return, but giving them something for free and giving them some takeaways that they can appreciate, but also just being nice.
So do you think that can show up as giving value, giving business tips and tricks, giving, in that way? Yeah. And then the flip side is that, you made it very clear just there, but for our listener at home, I really like to just make sure they hear this, is that it's about the balance. Because if you're doing the ask all the time and you haven't built a relationship with people, then they're going to go, who are you, girl, to be asking from me? I don't even know you, And then on the flip side, if you give too much and you never ask, they're just going to think that you get everything for free. So it's such isn't it?
Yeah. And so the most important aspect of PR, it's the relationship part. So building public relations is about building relationships, whereas advertising is more about, selling. I'm selling you. It's inward looking. The brand is talking at you. Whereas public relations is that the brand is engaging and listening to you as well, and speaking and having a conversation with you. So those are the major differences between the two.
Yeah. And it's so important because, it's such a different relationship when, if you write a company and they get back to you, within a day or two, and they're loving and they're kind and they hear your concern, and you all of a sudden feel validated. You're like, yes, I was heard, and feel good about that relationship, as opposed to being ignored or just being seen as a number. And I think that, over the last 10 years or so, it's fascinating to see how things have changed and evolved, how we really do, we're starting to understand that we need to live in a culture. And maybe it was before and I just wasn't paying attention to it as much because I wasn't in that world so clearly. But, it's about building that relationship, yes, and giving that value and understanding and respecting, the journey together. I mean, do you think that patience is a big part about it as well, because we kind of live in an industry where, or in a time where we expect to have our 7-figure, 8-figure businesses, you know, running right away. I've taken XYZ course, so I read that book. Now I'm ready. It's like, no, girl, this shit takes time.
Slow down. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like what you said right there, but also the fact that, you know, public relations, I think, is the oldest aspect of marketing. It's been there for a time immemorial. It's just that it's never been recognized. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why public relations is still not a profession, because they're finding it difficult to put it in a box and create it as a profession. So it's just an industry, but it's not necessarily a profession. What I mean by that is that anybody can be a publicist, anybody can be a PR person, because it's the oldest form of marketing. Back in the days before anything was written and digital, it was about being courteous to your neighbor, talking to your neighbor, and having, so you were doing public relations even then. We just didn't label it. You know, it's about peer-to-peer conversations. It's about referring, putting in a good word for somebody else that you went to school with and they're doing a business, and you're saying, oh my gosh, Lauren is doing an amazing job. You should go and speak to her. It's that word of mouth. You know what I mean? So that's what public relations is. It's about reputation management. It's about getting validated for what you're doing and being appreciated, and other people giving you credibility. By them giving you credibility, they're endorsing you. They're using their word of mouth as a peer to say, yes, she's good enough and I'll vouch for her. That is PR in essence, and that's the bottom line. So if you put it in that such simple terms and you forget about all the gobbledygook language about earned and shared media, then it becomes something that's understood and appreciated at a grassroots level.
Yeah. And you know what I was thinking about when you were saying that, and, you know, I know you'll set me straight because, you know, you're a real talk girl, which I love. You know, I was imagining, you know, when you were talking about how, back in the day, you know, we were always just doing PR. I was just imagining, you know, going to the neighborhood barbecue, right? And if you're going from work and you happen to be wearing a shirt with a brand on it, well, you're doing good PR. You're showing your support for the neighborhood. You're like, right? That's a clear example of you. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's it. Spot on. You know, that's so exactly funny. What it is.
Yeah. And I love that, you know, your focus, like that, you know, you've brought up the whole conversation about how important it is to have these relationships, because, you know, really when you think about it, you know, and I know I said it before, but we really do want instant gratification. We really do want to get the sale right now, right? You know, a lot of business people are, you know, they're living for the next sale because it's a hard slog at times. And you know, but if you think about it in simple terms of like, you know, even friendships, you know, your strong friendships didn't just happen over one coffee. They happened over you showing up and building trust and being reliable and having integrity and and doing what you say you're going to do. And these things, they take time to show up as the, you know, the expert you are, or doing what you say you're going to do. Doing it well.
Exactly. So you've got to take time and germinate that relationship and build it through and through. But yes, of course, at the end of the day, everybody needs to pay their bills, like you said. So there's so much that you can give for free, and relationships can come in a transactional way from the word go, and that's fine. If you met this person and they happened to be in need of your services, and you're able to provide that value and you're able to provide that service right away, there's no need why you need to go run through the alphabet from A to Z in order to create that transaction, right? So if that person says, I need to buy a phone now, you're not going to start telling them, you say, well, wait a minute. Do you know the story about Apple and how it was invented, before you actually tell them, you know, this is the checkout and this is how much the iPhone costs. So much as, yes, relationship building is important, it's not, the relationship building is not on one side of the funnel, the sales funnel. It's not just at the beginning and then then towards the end, that's when you ask for the sale. It's actually an ongoing, evolving relationship. You build it from the beginning, but it never ends. So even after you've got that sale, you continue to build on that relationship. In fact, if anything, after sales relationship building is more important than the before sales.
Thank you for saying that, because a lot of people think that, oh, I've made the sale, my job is done. It's like, no, you can follow up, you can upsell, the referrals, everything you were talking about, how when you have a good, those people are now an advocate for your brand. What about inviting them to an exclusive night? What about giving them a sneak peek on the latest model of the blah, 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 right? Exactly. I love that you're bringing that up, because that's what so many people do wrong. And I often think to myself, wow, I just bought something from you and you've never tried to market to me again.
Yeah. Then you don't want to know me because you've got my money and you don't want to know me.
Yeah, but I got more money to spend with you.
It's right? The aftercare. And I always say this to most of my clients. I say to them, customer service is a form of PR. So, you know, when a customer has had bad customer experience, they're going to badmouth you. Equals reputation damage. And reputation damage, that means you need a fixer. You need a PR guru to come and fix your reputation. But you can DIY it and keep it intact from the beginning, from the word go. That first 3 seconds a customer walks into your store or your place or your wherever you're doing your business should be a lasting impression. So that should be the reputation that you want them to take away with them. What was the customer experience the first 3 seconds? Did you smile? Did you greet them? Did you make it memorable? Did you make them feel like a rock star when they walked in the first 3 seconds? If you lost the customer the first 3 seconds, forget about it.
Yeah, let me use this as an example. I'm going to treat myself to a fancy ring, I decided. So I went to the mall the other day and I was going into different ring stores, and I went into one and I thought, ooh, there was one there that I really was looking at. The woman was serving one customer, but she didn't even acknowledge me. Like, she didn't even say, welcome. And I thought, I would be happy to wait because I know you're serving someone else. I'm not blind. But the fact that you didn't even acknowledge that I've been here. And I waited for 5 minutes looking around and she didn't do anything. And I just went, all right, I'm out. And so I just wanted to reiterate that with that little story, because it made me feel that I wasn't important.
Exactly, because at the root of it all, because before I started PR, and like I said, I was always in retail, and that's my background. Customer service is in my DNA. So I was very privileged to be trained by the best in retail in New York. I was trained by David's Bridal because that's where I used to work. And they embedded that in us, that, you know, customer service is king. Yes. So if you can correlate customer service to public relations, they're intangible, they're connected. You can't separate them. Yeah. Because it's about reputation building and reputation management and customer experience expectations, managing the customer's expectations is all part of PR, whether you label it as PR or not.
Yeah, I love that you've made that really clear, because I don't think I really thought about it until you said it. But you're totally right. It's so, there's I've talked about them on the show before, so for my listener at home, I'm sorry, but I love this brand. It's this so it's a toilet paper brand, and I keep talking about it, which is so weird. They're called Who Gives a Crap, okay? But I got behind their values. I know, it's crazy. I love their marketing. I love the way that they I love that everything they do is like recycled materials. They donate money to building toilets around the world. I got it. Their PR is so good. They send the best newsletters. They're funny. They respond right away. I got a newsletter the other day that said, we've donated $5.6 million to build toilets around the world, thanks to you, you know, as a customer. And I wrote back and I went, this is great, you know? And then somebody from their team wrote me and said, it's because of customers like you. And I thought, Wow.
Yeah.
And because as a marketer, I'm always paying attention to how people treat me so that I can learn from it.
Uh-huh.
And I thought,
Yeah.
wow, you've just made me feel good and reinforced our relationship yet again. And that's just through toilet
Yeah.
paper brand. Like, seriously? Right? But it's everything that
Exactly.
you're talking about.
Yeah, but then toilet paper is not just toilet paper. Can you imagine the world
Yeah.
without toilet paper?
Yeah. Well, we learned, I mean,
So we need to
COVID
be great.
times.
We learned that with COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's so
So
funny.
that's why I always say, like, public relations cannot be one standing. It's all part of the user experience. So it's like it's a body, a part. One part cannot function without the other. So marketing cannot function without PR. Marketing cannot function without advertising, and so on and so forth. So they're all interrelated, and that's why
Yeah.
it has to be an integrated experience for a customer from the word go.
I want to bring up an important, well, I think it's important, Jen. You tell me whether or not you agree. Okay, so.
If it's important to you, it's important to me.
Okay, girl, thank you. So it's basically that, once you've also done all this PR work, you need to make sure that your backyard is ready to greet the people, right? And I'll use a really quick story.
Say that again?
So basically, okay, I'll just use this story and then I'll ask my question in a better way. So I was working for a big media company, right? And we were selling advertising to clients. And there was this one business, and it was a restaurant, and the lighting was wrong. It was like fluorescent lighting, a huge room. It didn't make you want to go in and eat there. And all I could think about was, these people are wasting their money, because the people might go there, but they're not going to want to stay because it didn't feel inviting. So wouldn't you agree that if you're going to be putting in all your work into building your relationships, showing your values, doing your customer service properly, that you need to have everything else also prepared? Like, your website's got to look great on mobile. Your socials have to look professional. You have to have your offers and your packages ready. So are those things that you help your clients with as well? Essentially make sure that they're ready to take on the business once the business is coming to them?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because that's all part of user experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the UX is also just as important as UI, user interface. But of course, I think I'm quite guilty about that. I tend to neglect my own platforms and stuff like that. But then
it's always easy to
I
tell
think that
what to do.
digital spaces we can get away with a little bit, but in terms of a physical place, I think that people need to pay more attention to that, because again, it comes back to the 3-minute experience, and what does a customer feel like when they walk in? Do they feel like a rock star when they walk in? Not just about how you greet them, but again, the ambience of the place that they walk into. So I think the brick and mortar kind of businesses are essentially very vulnerable when it comes to that. Appearance is everything.
Yeah, but you could also say online too, right? Because if you look at your website and your website doesn't look great on mobile, or your socials have, like, especially if you have a personal brand, if like somewhere along the line you morphed into a personal brand, but you still have all your shit from 2014 on there, and right? I mean, these are things that are key, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I haven't done, you've just made me think like, oh my gosh, do I still have things from 2014? But anyway, it's difficult to clear out your digital junk from online if you're not paying attention. And I think most of us are quite guilty of that. But it's good to have an audit, your social media audit every so often and clear out. And if you're a holder like me, you have to be brutal and just say, I have to let go of this nice post that I did in 2014. Nobody's going to ever see it again. But you've got to let go, because
screenshot it. take a screenshot of it, remember the good times later. But no, you're right. And I did a whole, cause I have a membership, and I did a whole training the other day called Coming Through the Front Door. And it basically goes into what you were just talking about, which is thinking about the user experience. And so often we're so in our business that we're not taking the time to think about how does it look like to somebody else. And so
absolutely,
you love that post from 2014, but is it representative of who you are now? Or is it representative of the work that you're doing or the professionalism? I mean, I can do graphics. Okay, when I say that, I mean, I'm not a graphic designer. And if anyone asked me to do that, I would say no. Like, I can do my own, nobody else's. But the amount that I've improved over the years is I wouldn't want anything from years ago to be seen anywhere, because it just doesn't represent who I am now, I suppose, who I've evolved into. So kind of sounds like that's also how
I like that. I really like that. I mean, that's why I like having conversations like this. It's not about me talking about what I know, but I also learn from you. Like, that is something that I will take on board myself personally. That's a lesson that I've just learned from you. Like, that's really important, that I've probably neglected and not paid attention to. So that's a light bulb going in my head.
Well, that's cool. It's nice to have an exchange of energy then. Very good. Thank you, my friend. That's fabulous. So, kind of nearing the end of the hour already. Obviously, I could talk to you for hours, Jen. But let's talk a little bit about your Wired Women YouTube series, because I'm really interested in, how you got that started. I know that, you created your own table out of the wood in the woods, and you're sitting at it, and you're inviting other Wired women, to join you. So can you talk to me a bit about the inspiration for this series and how did it all start?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me that. That's my passion project right there. I'm so passionate about Wired Women because that's a representation of when you read my bio at the beginning. I think there was a part where it says I'm a philanthropreneur at heart and a publicist. So that's where that comes into. I'm passionate about social justice. So social justice being a representation of inequality in terms of political, economic, and so on in society. And so when I see that there's inequality in any given sphere, in any given space, I want to jump out and start advocating for people to have an equilibrium. So that's how Wired Women came about. I felt like women especially were not being heard in the right places at the right time. And they were being left out in the C-suite positions. They were being left out in Forbes magazine or being invited. The majority of the time, especially even during just COVID, when we were all glued to our television sets, the women were always given the secondary position, and it was always a man in the forefront. With the Me Too movement and all that stuff that I ascribe to, I believe that women voices need to be heard as well, not just to be seen. So that's why I created Wired Women. It's about the creating synergy between women that have gone ahead and challenged the status quo, and they're saying to the world to say, I can do this as well as a woman, as well as a man. So here I am doing something that is very different, but it's also mostly about trailblazing women that are doing something that's extraordinary, that's very different from the ordinary day job that any woman can do or any man can do. So the idea about this, behind this, it's a select group of women that are going to be highlighted or spotlighted, let me use that, as thought leaders, specifically to mentor people that are trying to get into entrepreneurship at the beginning, at the very start of their journeys. They're going to motivate them by telling their stories and telling them their pitfalls, their experiences, and everything that they've gone through, so that that person who's thinking of entering their specific industry, let's say for you, you're a marketer and you're my guest on Wired Women, and somebody's listening to you, they'll be like, oh, so this is what she had to do to get to this point. And so they'll learn from your experience, they'll replicate your success without having to go back from the beginning to do those things. So hence Wired Women was born, because I believe that women are the heart of any community. because when you educate a woman, then you educate a nation. So I believe that women have the ability to share freely. They're less competitive when it comes to giving. Men tend to hold to what they know because they want to be the only ones at the top, whereas women are more willing to give and share with people coming behind them what they know and what they've learned.
Yeah, I think sometimes women can get a bit of a bad rep as being like bitchy or having that competitive thing. But, you know, when you get to know other like-minded women who are out there and they're building their empires, you know, I just feel, you know, especially doing this podcast, and I'm sure you would feel like this on your show, you know, Wired Women, that you feel inspired and you feel light, you know, like lighted up by, you know, or lit up by the women that you talk to and their stories and their resilience. And it's inspiring, isn't it? It's so awesome. I love it.
Yeah, so it's about holding each other's hands and rooting ourselves on to say, you know, you can do it, girl, you can do this. It's about girl power, but in a more of a one person at a time storytelling, because I believe that when also women are put in one space, there's so many voices. Women like to talk. So there's so many voices that are overriding each other. Nobody listens. So if you put the camera, the spotlight on one specific woman, one guest at a time, then you get to hear the nuances and the deep story from the beginning to the end. And you give that one specific person a platform to speak. So I know that time is not on my side. So in this lifetime, I'll probably just speak to 500 women by the time I'm done. But I'm hoping that that's a legacy that I can leave behind, and the conversation that can continue to go on long after I'm gone. So that's the idea behind Wired Women.
It's beautiful. And I think, you know, one of the things that you said earlier was so important that it's worth bringing up again, which is that, you know, other people have gone before you. And so, you know, if there's no need to reinvent, you know, the way that you do things, if there's already a trail, and I'm not saying that, you know, everyone has the right, you know, way to get there. There are different perspectives, but, you know, I think we sometimes spend a lot of time going, well, I'm going to do it this way, my way. And it's like, yeah, but there's a proven way to do it. And then you can get where you want to go. I love that you're, you know, essentially saying that the program is dedicated to going, hey, here are some of the ways that you can get to where you want to go. And you don't have to go through all the tough lessons and the difficulties and the years and years and years of learning.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but also to also know, and I think the other important thing to remember is that there's a personality behind every person, every identity. So that personality to come to the forefront as well, and not to be stifled by so many voices and so much of a structured path. So, you know, it's up to our viewers to listen to and then pick out what speaks to them, and they apply to that. So different guests will say different or share different nuggets and attributes and traits that our viewers can hopefully pick up from and make it into their own, really, and create their own strategy and their own framework.
Yeah. That's also right. And also, you know, sometimes someone will say one thing and you'll learn, you'll have that aha moment where you go, wow, I never thought about it like that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So Jen, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show. Our hour is already there. It's amazing. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to bring up?
Not really, but obviously if anyone wants to learn more about what I'm doing, they can obviously go, if you don't mind me saying, so they can go to Spotlight NetTv on YouTube channel and have a nice watch of the Wired Women programs. We've been especially having amazing guests on it. And they can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Jennifer Faith Limula Nash. And I would just love to speak to anybody who would be willing and interested in getting rid of their imposter syndrome fear and just talking them through it and just helping them to get more visible and get more confident, really.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I'll put a link to all that stuff in the show notes as well, so that our listeners just have to head to the show notes and you can, find Jennifer with just a couple of clicks. So thank you so much. Just before we wrap up, I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, but I guess I am. I'd love to know whether or not, my guests have had any inspirational books that they recommend to read. I'm just such a voracious reader myself, so I just always love to get a book title. Are there any books that you would recommend that people read, or any that have really influenced or shaped you?
That's a very good question, because just recently a friend of mine just published a book which is called Answers for Modern Communicators. And it's a guide to effective business communication. And I feel, because she's a PR guru, she's one of my mentors, and she's been in the industry for over 25 years. This is written by Deidre Breckenridge, and she's a very profound, she's a professor, she's a very well-educated professor in PR. So yeah, if you want to know anything about PR, she's the go-to person. She's also a LinkedIn instructor. So you can find some of her work on LinkedIn.
That's great. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, because it's always great to have different perspectives and to see people who have gone before, I suppose you could say, going back to that.
Exactly. And she was my guest. So she's the current guest that I have on my current show, the one that's showing right now. So yeah, she's amazing.
Fabulous. We'll check it out for sure. Thank you so much, Jen, and wishing you all the best. And thank you for all the wisdom that you shared today. It was great.
You're so welcome, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please do leave us a review where you listen to your podcast and share it with your friends. New episodes every Monday.